sorry, kiddo, I really am. You have a good soul. And I hate giving good people bad news.
He's Tony, I'm Mike, and today we're reviewing 1979's Stalker.
Очень сложная система ловушек, что ли. Но стоит тут появиться людям, как все здесь приходит в движение. Исполнится ваше самое заветное желание. Самое выстраданное.
This was a Jordan pick, and why? Because Possesion did so well, we thought, screw it, he gets a regular pick once a month now. Well, not only that, but he has picked something interesting every time, because his first pick that we did for him was Jin Roh.
Yes, yes.
And then also, actually, I think he did Perfect Blue as well.
Yes, that was his
pick,
recommendation
which
as well.
Did not get it the love it deserves. Watch that video. It'll be pinned at the end.
And then we had Possesion, and
this is another one of those, what the fuck did I just watch movies?
I'm gonna say this movie is two things. Number one, it's a commitment because it's 2 hours and 40 minutes. It's not a short film. Number two, it's in Russian, so you have to read everything. And number three, everything is revealed to you with a precision of timing that you only see in Soviet films from this time. The only movie I can think of that this really reminded me of was the original Russian version of Solaris, which is also a 4-hour film, but you don't understand what's going on until they want you to understand what's going on. And Solaris has a lot of themes that overlap with this, but if you watch this as a straight narrative, which it's not, but if you watch it as a straight narrative, the story's kind of simple. There's this character, and he's a stalker, and what does that mean? That means that he takes people into the zone.
Зона – это очень сложная система ловушек, что ли.
And in this particular trip, he is taking a writer and a physicist into the zone, and they're supposed to be arriving at the room, and the room is there to give them whatever they desire.
Вот тут-то и поползли слухи, что где-то в зоне есть место, где исполняется желание.
And so they trek into the zone, and you're following them from sneaking past the border guards to get into the zone, their trek through the zone through the meat grinder to the room, and then you kind of get an inkling of what it actually is in the zone, what the zone actually is and represents.
Потому что дикобразу дикобразово, а совесть, душевные муки – это все придумано от головы. Понял он все это и повесился.
Then you get to find out what happens to them after they've come back out of the zone.
Верит не только эти двое. Никто. Кого же мне водить туда? Самое страшное, что не нужно это никому. Никому не нужна эта комната.
That's the straightforward narrative, but the fact of the matter is that you're introduced to the characters and everything is in a sepia tone, which is indicating that this is the mundane life outside of the zone. But the minute that they actually venture into the zone, everything goes into vivid color. And while there's not a lot there, the cinematography is really rich.
Very Wizard of Oz in that aspect of it.
Yeah. And that's actually kind of, I think, one of the elements that is drawn upon on this, and why he chose sepia for that one. But then while they're traveling through the zone, they have like all these lofty discussions of what the zone is and what it's there to do and all this and how dangerous it is to be in the zone and what's the proper way to travel through the zone. And then they finally get to the structure where they are traveling in, and you start to hear about this character named Porcupine and what happened with him. They wind up in this room. Somehow electricity is still there. They get a phone call. The physicist has an exchange with his boss and basically says, I'm gonna, report you, and gonna make sure everybody knows what's going on. And his boss is like trying to strong arm him into, no, you just, keep your mouth shut or I will destroy you. And he's kind of got that old thing.
Ты понимаешь, что это конец тебе как ученому?
Ну так радуйся.
Ты понимаешь, что будет? Что будет, если ты посмеешь?
Опять пугаешь.
The journalist is kind of revealed to be a bit of a coward because he followed it in and he went through all this, but he doesn't actually want to be the first one to have to go into the room. He wants to observe what happens when other people go into the room.
Я? Нет, я не хочу.
Вы не беспокойтесь, это сейчас пройдет.
Едва ли.
And then...
The physicist wants to blow up the room. He brings in a bomb.
Yes, the physicist... Well, I was going to say, the physicist actually, when he's supposed to go into the room and he's got a 20-kiloton bomb that he brought with him, that he assembled.
Никому, как видно, никакого счастья место это не принесет. А если попадет в дурные руки, видимо, должен существовать принцип никогда не совершать необратимых действий. Я ведь понимаю, я ведь не маньяк. Но пока эта язва здесь открыта для всякой сволочи, ни сна, ни покоя.
After they have a conversation about Porcupine and what it is, Porcupine went in there and he was supposed to be going in there to help his brother. That was his big wish. That was his big dream. That's what he wanted to happen. What wound up happening is that the room gave Porcupine what his heart truly desired, which was a lot of money, wealth, riches. And it didn't help his brother. So it kind of exposed Porcupine's real nature, and Porcupine wound up hanging himself because of this. Faced with this reality that, no, there's what you've been telling people that you want. There's what you profess to the world that you think you want. But what your heart secretly desires is probably not that at all. Part of that is performative. Part of that is you trying to impress people with what a good person you are, or what a righteous person you are, or what a brave person you are. But if your heart is actually examined by this alien intelligence, and you're actually given what you truly want, you're exposed, and there's nothing you can do to make that go away. So the physicist disassembles the bomb. He literally throws the parts of the bomb. The only thing that he pockets the plutonium slug or uranium slug, whatever it is, and then he throws the timer into the room. And then there is this strong visual that I can't get out of my head, because the timer is sitting there and it's surrounded with this water, and then there is this black cloud that comes up over the timer. And I'm trying to decide if that is supposed to be interpreted that timer corrupted the room and that's what the black is actually representative of, or if the room, like the true desire of the timer is to time something and then explode, and therefore death is what follows, and that's the black that is coming into there. So I don't know if they're indicating that the room has actually been contaminated. But the writer doesn't want to go into the room because, it is going to expose it. I'm a student of human nature. I'm here to watch and observe and report on everything. No, it's going to expose that he's a coward, and that the reason that he is an observer is because he's not brave enough or moral enough or upstanding enough to actually do all these things that think ought to be done. But he's more than happy to talk shit about what he thinks the world ought to be. And he bloviates the entire trip through to the actual structure and then through the room.
Во-первых, если я стану вспоминать свою жизнь, то вряд ли стану добрее. А потом, неужели ты не чувствуешь, как это все срамно? Унижаться, сопли распускать, молиться.
Then we have the stalker himself, and he basically says that he's not allowed to go into the room. His job, his purpose is to bring people to it, not to go into it himself, and that he can't go into it.
Сталкеру нельзя входить в комнату. Сталкеру вообще нельзя входить в зону с корыстной целью. Нельзя, вспомните дикобраза.
So ultimately, none of them decide to go in, and there's this moment where you see there's a shot from inside of the room looking out at the three of them sitting there. And for some reason it starts to rain inside of the room. And then it rains for several minutes. It's one continuous shot that slowly pushes in, and then the rain stops. And I'm assuming that that's indicative of a renewal or a purging or a filtering or a cleaning. I'm not sure exactly what the rain represents. I actually asked Jordan what he thought the rain represents, and we got into a very long conversation and ultimately arrived at I don't know.
So yeah, I mean, really, what you're describing is seems like to you is what you see is what you get in this movie. Cause
yes and no. There's a lot of metaphor. There's a lot of buried meaning in a lot of stuff.
So here's my thoughts on this one. I actually got two different theories on this one. I'm not sure which one I think is probably the most appropriate. My first thought is that this is more of a acid trip. The stalker is more of a shaman. Like, this is more of a spiritual journey more than it is anything. I don't think there really is a room or anything like that. I think really what it is he's taking them out somewhere, and that's, to me, it's kind of represented by, so you're in this dreary place, but yet when they get to the zone, when the shit starts kicking in, everything's all kind of bright and cheery, or, you know, it's a whole different world, really. And then the things that don't make any sense, like when the part where they lose the physicist for a second, and he goes back for his rucksack, and and it's like, well, how'd you have ahead of us? Like, he didn't get ahead of you. You walked around the fucking circle because you guys are tripping balls. You don't know what the fuck you're going, or what you're doing, you know. And all this exposition, all their talk is talk that people that are stoned or on mushrooms and shit like that, they do. They get in deep philosophical discussions and stuff like that. It doesn't mean that what they're saying is bullshit, but it's the only time where you would actually talk about stuff like this to another stranger or to another person.
Yeah.
People don't have these conversations normally. It just doesn't happen in most cases unless you're on something. So to me, this kind of comes up more like a spiritual journey or a drug-induced journey. What also reinforces that is that in multiple spots in the timeline of this movie, there are syringes on the ground peppered throughout this movie.
Yeah, no, you're
even at the very beginning, there's a syringe right there at the table next to him on his nightstand.
Yeah.
So that's one school of thought, is that this is all just a drug-induced thing, and it's them going through their
Fear and Loathing in Moscow.
basically something like that, and it's a spiritual journey. So whatever you come out of the room with is, you know, no different than if you go to in the desert and trip peyote and you have a spiritual guide with you or something like that.
Okay.
The other school of thought would be that the stalker is a bullshit artist.
Okay.
That, like, this is all just a scam. He's telling these people that I'm going to take you to this place, and then he tells you the story of Porcupine, and that's just kind of like his
out.
Exactly. Well, why don't you go into this room? Why I can't go in this room is the rules, which there's not fucking rules. It's all bullshit. And there may have been a porcupine, and which there's a dead body that they show in the film.
Two, actually.
Right, which is probably Porcupine and his brother, whoever it is. So they may actually be real people, but what's actually gone there is not real. There is no room. There's a room, but it's not real. It's bullshit.
So
it's all 100% bullshit. And they actually call him out on his bullshit at one point when they're like right outside of the room. There's that conversation that I think the physicist has with them, and kind of calls him out on some shit.
Я же тебя насквозь вижу. Плевать ты хотел на людей. Ты же деньги зарабатываешь на нашей тоске. Да не в деньгах даже дело. Ты же здесь наслаждаешься. Ты же здесь царь.
So that's my other school of thought. I'm not sure which one I think it is, but I think it's one of those two.
I was going to say, I can't disagree with anything you're saying there. It makes a perfect amount of sense.
Yeah.
I'm only going to point out that the ending of this movie, they leave the zone. They're at the cantina again, and there's the three of them there, and then the wife shows up, and she has that monologue, and she basically says, I was told that when I married him that it was going to lead to a certain kind of life, and she basically says that she would rather have the life that she has, which has happy moments and sad moments, than have a life that is just completely gray and colorless.
Мама говорила, он же сталкер, он же смертник, он же вечный арестант, и дети. Что смертник и что вечный арестант, и про детей. Уверена была, что с ним мне будет хорошо. Я знала, что и горя будет много, но только уж лучше горькое счастье, чем серая унылая жизнь.
So we get that, but then when they flash to the daughter, there's several things that are revealed that they show you plainly at the beginning of the film that you don't actually get to see what they really mean until that last 10, 15 minutes of the movie. And the first shot is their bedroom. And it looks like it's this Spartan empty room with just a bed in it and a table next to it, and it's a family bed. They're all three sleeping in it. But when they show it at the end, they show it from a 90-degree angle, and you see that he has this massive bookshelf that is floor to ceiling and just filled with books. So this guy that immediately you're judging as, he's poor trash and yeah, he's probably up to something he ought not be up to. The minute you see these books, it kind of dispels that that's who this person is, because people like that don't read, and they certainly don't have a whole personal library that they put together. So your assumptions about that character are completely dispelled in that shot, which is not given to you until 2 hours and 30 minutes into the film. The other thing is the daughter, Monkey, as she's referred to. You only see her in bed at the beginning, but then you realize that she's actually crippled, that she has crutches, that all that.
They actually mentioned something about that earlier, because there's the rumor that her daughter's a mutant and that she doesn't have any legs and stuff like that. It's a bunch of speculation and shit like that.
Well, not so much speculation, because they actually
she has legs.
Yeah, well,
so
she
that
does.
part is
Yeah, she does have
speculation.
legs. She does have legs, but they do. You'll notice that every time that they show Monkey, they actually show her in full color. And she's not in the zone. She's literally outside the zone, and she's actually sitting at a table in their home. And as she's staring, seemingly off into nothing, she starts moving glasses on the table with her mind. So that kind of says that she is a mutant, and the fact that she has some sort of telekinesis and is able of moving stuff.
You could take it that way. You could also take it as she's in her own mind, and she knows that she can't move things by herself. At least she can't move herself. But, in her mind, she can move things. She can manipulate things like that. So that's kind of how I took it.
Yeah.
That's very metaphorical. I don't think she's actually moving that shit. Especially if you're coming from a point of view of, anything in the zone is, either in your head or is mystical or, however you want to paint it, something otherworldly.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's either some sort of catastrophe, radioactive accident, because they show the family walking past what's a nuclear reactor. You can plainly see the water cooling towers and the smoke that's coming off, the steam that's coming off. So there's radiation is involved in there some way, but then they also have that whole barrier, at the beginning of it, when they're leaving the zone. It's not we got to jump the fence. There's armed cops and train cars and all this stuff. So the zone is very obviously being protected to keep people out.
So if this really was some place that you could go, that could grant wishes and do all the things that they say they can do, then why hasn't the government gone there and done something with it, like they allude to and shit like that? So it's kind of one of those things. You have to make a lot of leaps of logic to kind of make that pan out.
Yeah.
You know, logically. But that is the great thing about this movie, is that we can have this discussion
Yes.
of what it means. So even if I'm wrong and you're right, or vice versa,
Yeah.
that's the best thing about this movie, is it's left open to your interpretation. I don't know, B, you can probably chime on this one. Does the director of this actually give an interpretation of this, or they just kind of leave it up to the viewer on this?
He has stated before that he does have a correct interpretation, and that while some people get closer to the interpretation, he will never openly state what it was. This was before he died.
He wants the
But
conversation.
He did actually talk about how the ending is pretty much the biggest key to the correct interpretation, and you actually both talked about it, whether or not the girl actually moves the glass or not.
Yeah.
Does she move it? Does she not move it?
Yeah.
Is she imagining it, or was it the train that moved it?
That's right. Yeah, there was. Yeah.
To whether or not you were getting close to the interpretation. He says there are people that got really close and people who got it right, but he will never tell you what it is. But that is the entire clue to what the interpretation is.
Yeah.
Was what you saw at the end real? Was it telekinesis? Was it in her head? Was it the train?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
there you have it.
So
There you are.
basically, this movie is really designed to unpack you as a person when you put your own interpretation on it, how you read this film. And I mean, honestly, it's very obviously designed that way. And that has a lot to do with the pacing. And I'm also going to say that this movie is weirdly hypnotic. You look at the 3 hours, the 2 hour and 40 some odd minute, and you think, wow, that's a long movie. But when you're watching it, it feels like it goes by a lot faster than it does.
To you it did, to me not so much. I actually tuned out in several portions of this movie.
Yeah.
Because I'll be honest with you. Before I watched this movie, I watched 7 movies prior to this. A lot of them were long, a lot of them I had to read. So when I got to this one, it was a struggle to get through.
Yeah.
And the good thing about it, though, is it kind of triggered my mind to like, all right, I need to kind of dig a little deeper than what they're doing here. Obviously, what they're doing here is not surface level. There's more to it. And I got tired of reading.
I had to stop in the middle and then go back and watch the last half of this.
Because this motherfucker loves a monologue. Because it's monologue after monologue after monologue after monologue. And to be honest with you, you don't need every monologue. Really, the key monologues is like the beginning and at the room, at the end. And there's some stuff that's peppered in the middle, but it really doesn't matter. Really what matters is at the beginning and the end. Everything else in the middle is a lot of monologue.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong. And I know that there's a lot of poetry that is remembered, which, again, they hint at it through the dialogue, but then when you see that shot at the end where he's got that massive wall of books and you're going, okay, yeah. That makes sense. This isn't his thoughts, he's quoting from a lot of this stuff. He's remembering his favorite passages and stuff like that. He's not the dumb, trashy guy that they hired to bring him in because he's a reliable tour guide. He's actually just as intellectual as the two people that he's leading into the zone. So that's kind of, like I said, it completely kind of flips on its head what your interpretation of that character is.
But see, to me, he never came across as a dumb shit, because he's hanging in with these other guys and their conversation and stuff like that. So that never came across to me. The only thing that really hinted at it that he was a lowlife is just the fact that he was a criminal and he engages in, at that time, is a criminal activity or something that's looked down upon.
Yeah, they say that he spent 5 years in jail and that his wife is worried that he'll go back to jail again.
But they don't say, at least as far as I remember, they don't say specifically why he's in there. So, I mean, it could be any number of things. But I appreciated that monologue, though, at the end with the wife. So you can see it from her point of view. It's like, why would you stay with this guy? Well, you know what? I didn't want a boring existence. I knew what I was getting into, so don't feel sorry for me.
No, I didn't do any notes on this film, which is a rarity for me. There was one thing that I did catch, though. They shot this film And apparently they discovered during developing that they used the wrong film stock and it was unusable. So they had to go back and reshoot the whole movie a second time. Yes.
Sucks.
So if you need
That
to understand,
sucks.
if you need to understand that this it was a vision and he knew exactly what he wanted to put on film. And the fact that some of these takes, you're so used to 30 seconds, then a cut, and a line of dialogue and a cut. Oh, we got to switch from this camera to this camera to this camera. And the fact that you have these super patient, rich, character-driven, single frame shots that go on for 3, 4, 5 minutes, and yet at no point does it feel like it needs an edit. At no point does it feel like they need to cut away. And I know that it feels long. I know that you thought it felt long. For me, I felt like I was like being pulled into it because it felt more like real life. In real life, there are no edits. I'm looking at you now, and we're not going to cut away to a scene or a clip from the movie or anything like that at all.
Yes, we are right here. No.
But I feel like the experience was intentional, that he wanted as few
absolutely.
as possible
Yeah.
so that it felt like you were experiencing this with the characters.
Yeah, obviously this is what the man intended because he went through trouble doing it fucking twice. So now that being said, you could have easily knocked out an hour of this fucking movie and not missed a fucking thing. You wouldn't have.
You're not wrong.
Because it's monologue
No.
after monologue after monologue, and a lot of it becomes very redundant. The key things are the beginning and the end, and everything else in the middle is just indulgence.
I'm not
Now,
going to say you're wrong.
I can appreciate the artistry for it, so don't get me wrong. I respect the film. I appreciate the film. I will never go back and watch this again.
I'm going to say that I probably will go back and watch this again, and it's one of those that I feel like if you watch this a second time, you're going to pick up on all the details that you couldn't pick up on because you had to read it.
Didn't need to. Like I said, I tuned out several times in this movie, hopped back in, didn't miss a fucking thing.
So, well,
Again, your mileage will vary.
Oh, your mileage,
And again,
absolutely. This is not for everybody
No.
by any stretch. And it's intentionally dense, and it is intentionally long, and it is intentionally dialogue-y. But at the end of the day, like, I watched this film, and having seen the 4-hour cut of Solaris, this kind of felt right at home on the movie shelf, right next to that, because they want you to feel like you're part of it.
Oh, you feel part of it.
And I'm going to say that,
There's no doubt about that.
if you go for a hike with your friends, you could, shoot it and then just show the interesting stuff like, oh, here's this butterfly and here's this signpost and here's some bear tracks and blah, blah, blah. But if you actually had to watch the entire hike, the bullshit conversation and the fact that you're like trudging through greenery for, mile after mile after mile is the experience, not the stuff you discovered along the way. And that's kind of how I feel about this one, is that going along with these three characters for the trek is the meat of the movie, not the interpretation or like, is it an alien intelligence, or is it a natural phenomenon, or is it magic, or is it drugs? That's not the point. The point is that you get to travel with
stated
these
earlier,
characters.
that's exactly the point of this movie.
So
I'm going to disagree with you on that one. That is the point of this movie, is your interpretation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Interpretation is the point, but the journey is the story. So
yes. No, absolutely. I'll agree with you there 100%. Okay, so you're going to buy it. It's a
Oh
recommend
yeah,
for
absolutely.
you.
I don't have to buy it. Jordan already owns it. So
there you go. There
we
you
got
go.
a copy in the house. When he moves out one day, I'll buy a copy of it.
So here's going to be a shocker to you. I do recommend this movie. It is a compelling movie. I was in the wrong frame of mind to watch this at the time that I watched this.
That right there.
I will admit that all day long. Well, there's nothing to admit. It's just a fact of what it is. That being said, I will not watch it again. I don't think there's a need to really watch it again. But absolutely, you should check this movie out. if nothing else, to give your interpretation of it, or just enjoy the artistry that is here, because it is art. No doubt about it.
Yeah, get your friends that are cinephiles together, sit down, watch this movie, and then sit back and have a really long interpretation of a really long conversation about what the hell you think this means and that means, because that's what this movie is really about. Not the viewing of this right here, the having the conversation about it. And you've heard my interpretation. You've heard his very wildly different interpretation. We watched the same movie. I think that right there is why I find this to be a really powerful piece of cinema. This is something that you don't get from a lot of movies, and even less so nowadays, is a film that's chock full of ideas and you get to parse it. They're not going to spoon feed you, this is who this character is, and this is no. He put to film exactly what he intended to, and our interpretations of it are exactly what he wanted.
Yeah. So my homework for you is to put in the comments movies that leave you open to interpretation, or something that kind of makes you think about what it is you're watching. And beyond that, that's what I got.
We will catch you next time.